The Pacers have pacered again. Perhaps this is the most pastry game that's ever pacered. Nah, it's probably game one of the Knicks series. This was what was the win expectancy here? Like a mere 96% or something.
97.7. So that's pretty paltry for some of these wild Pacers comebacks. And by the
They
way, when
yeah.
that point was, just if people are curious, from Unpredictable using 50-50 odds, was when Shea made the second free throw to put OKC up 9 with 2:52 to go. That was the point where Unpredictable said the Thunder had the highest chance of winning.
Yeah, they had a pretty good chance when they were up 15 in the fourth as well. In fact, no team has come back from down 15 in the fourth in the finals since 1992. I remember that game very well as a 12-year-old lad. The Chicago Bulls came back from down 15 in the fourth quarter in game 6 against Portland to win the championship. And also, this is the first time on record since 1971 where a team in the finals down by 9 or more in the last 3 minutes was able to win. The Pacers are now the owners of 5 15-point comebacks in these playoffs. That is a record as much as it can be calculated since 1998. They never stop, never stopping. It's just what it is with these guys. Although I gotta say, this one didn't feel like the other ones to me. We'll get into obviously exactly how it was that it occurred. But I didn't even think OKC was that bad down the end. Is that a reasonable opinion?
So I think it's a split because I have some process issues with the Thunder that I didn't really fully appreciate until I watched it again. But in terms of the horrendous turnovers or like gigantic defensive miscues, the Thunder didn't have as many of those. So they didn't fall all over themselves, but there were some advantages they didn't exploit. And we'll talk about that later. But I think the reason for me why this was different than some of the other comebacks was partially the pressure that they put on the other team wasn't quite as explicit, but part of it was just that it wasn't as frantic, frenetic. Like it happened in a couple of different runs. Like I mean, remember, as you said, they were down 15 in the fourth quarter, but there was never a how is this happening? Oh my god, this is happening. It just kind of, and maybe that's just because that there was that stretch where there was just no stoppages, where there were no timeouts that went through it. It didn't feel as like, I mean, the Bucks ones in particular were just like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, you didn't have they can't get the ball in bounds. They can't get the ball over half court. It just went between Gary Buckner's legs. It's sorry, Gary Buckner Jr. Excuse me. Let me
Yes.
get his name right there. They're just, and I didn't think the Knicks offense wasn't that bad either. The Knicks actually scored more points. It was to 23-9 close in that game in the last 3 minutes. And this one, the Thunder did score. They did only score 4 points down the end, but there are also like kind of some long possessions too. I mean, the thing was, the Pacers, like, they didn't really. They had one big defensive play, I would say, but other than that, it was just they scored and they scored and they scored again. So let's go through the possessions here. We'll pick it up then. A play that didn't really get much notice from us at the time, but guess what? The Indiana Pacers benefited from another ridiculous lane violation call. The first time, it was a non-call. I begged, I pleaded with the NBA. You got to call every lane violation. Otherwise, no one's going to know what's a violation, what isn't. And hey, they have called a couple more. But what really needed to happen after that was you send out an officiating note to every team and just say, no, we're calling every lane violation like this is high school basketball. You can't do it anymore. Pascal Siakam, he holds onto the ball forever at the top of his release. By the way, same guy, right, as the Neesmith play. And with him at the line, Lou Dort, surely knowing that history, was like, I'm not letting someone run in for a tip dunk. I'm going to just step in early because they just let anybody step in early. I'm going to step in early this time. Of course, what would you say, 6 other people lane violated on that second Siakam free throw that he missed. So it should have been a jump ball. Like
Yes.
the fact that they're going to just call Lou Dort on it, who, yeah, was maybe more egregious than anyone else because he's at the 3-point line even to go and box out. Everyone else had like 2 feet in the lane at the time Siakam actually released ball. He's kind of hard to time out because he'll start his shot and then right when it looks like he's about to release it, he'll just sort of like hold it there for a second. It's probably why he's missing all these free throws. He's missed a lot of clutch free throws. No help from DeMar DeRozan's daughter this time. And so, but he missed the second one. And the lane violation got him back. Everybody lane violated. And so there's just, again, there's no clarity on this. You know, like it's like the tariffs just going back and forth. No one knows what to do. It's the same thing here. Like that's the whole problem is that no one actually knows what the rules are. And then you're just going to get called willy-nilly or you're not. That's why it has to, there's only one way to enforce it, which is you enforce it every time. But this should have, by the rules, been a jump ball. Another, by the way, terrible rule that a double lane violation is a jump ball that could easily be exploited going so far. But anyway, so that was the point. That's the point that the Pacers won by. Obviously, there was much more to it than that, but something else that needs to be on the docket here. So, yeah, go ahead.
And so that free throw cut the free throw cut the margin to 106.99. So the Pacers are still down 7 with 3:07 to go.
Yeah, and then Halliburton, they're running a lot of pick and roll at him. We'll talk more as at the end of the game as we kind of talk about the meat, or the end of this podcast as we talk about the meat of the game and what's going to happen going forward in this series. But Halliburton largely held up. I thought in the second half, though, the fourth quarter, Shea was able to attack him. Halliburton went for a reach and fouled Shea twice. It was obvious they're in the bonus. That was a big thing that both of these teams were in the bonus very early in the fourth quarter. So Shea makes 2 free throws, 9-point game, just under 3 minutes to go.
And then I thought the next play was a really significant one. Andrew Nembhard drives. He kind of went up and it very easily could have been a Pacers turnover. And it isn't. It again ends up getting recovered. And then something that I thought the Thunder got wrong a couple of times, and I thought this wasn't the worst, but it was the most important. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is guarding Aaron Nesmith, or ostensibly guarding Aaron Nesmith. And then Nesmith breaks to the corner, and Shai just doesn't really follow him. You could think it was because he was being conscious of the drive, but there isn't a good reason to leave Aaron Nesmith wide open in the corner. And so I think I understand the Thunder mentality, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff in the meat of the game. But so they gave up an easy corner 3 up by 9 because after the Shea free throws.
Yeah. Well, I would not characterize that as easy. He was actually kind of on the move. He got a screen. I think it was from Toppin
and
in the corner, and he rattled it in.
Sorry, cleaner than it needed to be. That's
yeah. No, I agree with that. But yeah, that was still, it was a hard shot. Yeah. But I agree, that was an error to knock the other.
And so that cut it from 9 to 6, 108, 102 with 2:38 to go.
So this is actually a good time to talk about this topic. You and I were asked, as we usually are in the playback, what would your closing lineups be? What was our answer to that?
We both, for the Thunder, said the lineup that they actually closed with, which was not what I think a lot of people expected, which is you don't have Chet Holmgren on the floor. Remember, they didn't start Isaiah Hartenstein in this game anyway, so they're already starting smaller than they have in the rest of these playoffs. And instead having Caruso out there, with the theory being this was also a very challenging Chet Holmgren offensive game. We'll talk about that later. That Holmgren wasn't a huge deterrent around the rim. The Pacers weren't getting a ton around the rim for most of the competitive portion of this game. And so they could get more space. They have more guys who could fly around more, kind of that theory of the case. So you and I both argued that the Thunder closing 5 should be the 5 they actually closed with. Not that either of us necessarily expected.
And it looked very good when they did that at the the end of the first half. That's really when they were able to build their lead. They got a flurry of steals, even though they weren't able to convert, as we'll talk about. But I thought the biggest reason to do that is just that Miles Turner is a really good player. And Rick Carlisle had shown that he would take Miles Turner off the floor with that configuration for the Thunder. The Thunder also wanted to do more switching, which they felt like with Chet and particularly with Hartenstein, they weren't comfortable with, because Tyrese Haliburton is just too good of a passer to pick apart some of these switches. I mean, like some of the passes he made in the fourth, like the one where they switched it, the pick and roll at the top. Hartenstein is guarding, I think it was Turner in the corner, and Hartenstein took one step towards the roll man who was rolling to the basket off the switch, and Haliburton saw that and gunned the pass to Turner in the corner for an immediate three-pointer. Just one wrong step from Hartenstein, and Haliburton saw it. Like, he's just so good of a passer off of any of those switches. They always throw it early, try to get a guy a little close out there on those switches. But that's still probably the best thing that you can do against the Pacer half-court offense. I thought their defense was overall pretty good, although big difference between the first and second halves, as we'll talk about. And so they wanted to be able to switch. But to me, the biggest thing was personnel-based. And this is probably the time to talk about it here, of just – and I thought the Thunder had the advantage to me intellectually, because there just wasn't an answer for how they're going to stop Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and his drive game if you have just basically four smalls on the floor. Like, Siakam made a big rim protection play, to his credit, at the end. He'd been scored on earlier. Toppin is useless defending the rim, and Shai did go right through him for a layup later on. But Miles Turner was massive defensively in this game. So getting him off the floor, I think, was awesome. It didn't work out, but if I had to run this game over again, I would do the exact same thing.
I would too. And and I'll talk about some of my issues with what the Thunder did, but that is not one of them. And so the next possession down.
Well, why don't we give everyone the numbers with Turner on and off the floor right now, because I think they are rather stark.
They are. And I think the place that you begin with that is the restrict area, or defining it out to 5 feet. And so when Miles Turner was on the floor, the Thunder were 10 of 27 inside 5 feet. That's not
unbelievable. Yeah, that is a really, and they smoked some layups, to be sure. I don't think these were all unbelievable contests, but it's pretty stark.
And then when Turner was off the floor, they also made 10 shots inside 5 feet, but it was on 15 attempts. So they went 10 out of 27 and then 10 out of 15.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. And, again, they didn't really do anything in the fast break in this game. So it really, a lot of it ended up being in the half court. And, is it like, man, Miles Turner can't guard Alex Caruso? Like, okay, like, why is that really any different than guarding Holmgren? Maybe Caruso is like a little faster as a screener or something, or like an attack off the dribble as the roll man a little better. I would have stayed with Turner there. So then, yeah, let's pick it up with our next possession here.
And so the next possession, we saw a lot of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander splitting the double and, getting through. He did a phenomenal job of that. Kicks the ball to the opposite side to J-Dub, who could have theoretically passed it to the corner, but instead, justifiably so, pass fakes into a clean look from 3, but J-Dub misses that 3, and so the lead stays at 6 at that juncture.
So then this was another massive shot. Nembhard had gotten stopped and almost turned it over on the last play, but he got Shai switched onto him after a second screen. They gave up the switch pretty easily. I mean, I think I'm okay with that.
I am too.
And Shai's defense wasn't amazing. I thought Shai actually defended Haliburton a little bit better when that was the matchup. They also were willing to give up that switch on occasion. And Nembhard's like a little bit stronger maybe than Shai. So Shai just wasn't, to me, was backed off a little bit too much, but he also didn't want to commit a foul and didn't want to let Nembhard get into his body. So Nembhard went into a big dribbling exhibition, step back left, hit a huge 3, pretty well contested, I would say, to cut it to 3. So they cut it from 9-3 in 2 possessions, excuse me. And then you had
Well, I could do the next play.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So Shea gets doubled again, but this time he doesn't split it. He passes the ball to Case and Wallace. They've been doing a lot of
That's right.
Wallace
Yeah.
screening because Case and Wallace was guarding what Halliburton was guarding him, and so you're bringing Halliburton in the action. They double. Shea passes it to Wallace. Wallace kicks it to Lou Dort. Pretty similar positioning to the J Dub three that had just missed. And just briefly, one of the weird Lou Dort dynamics in this game was that he made his three worst looks from three, and then he missed some of the other ones. This one was, I would say, probably middle of the road of the Lou Dort 3-point attempts in
It was a
terms of
good shot.
difficulty.
That's a
Yeah,
shot that I'm comfortable with him taking
right.
without taking a dribble. He was pretty. There was like kind of a late contest coming from the
Yeah,
side, but
it was fine.
that's a
Yeah,
decent shot.
yeah, it was
And
fine.
they had good process. They broke the paint, kick out. Like that's a shot
Mm.
for the offense to run on time. You got to take that shot.
You do. And so Jordan takes that shot. He's at that point was 5 of 8 from 3, but he misses that one to go to 5 of 9. And so the 3-point lead stays a 3-point lead. But then, oh boy, does Lou Dort redeem himself immediately following that.
Yeah, I thought he had one of his best help defending games
Yes.
that I've seen here, making blocks from behind. This one was ridiculous. Neesmith, who's a pretty good finisher, got a runway in semi-transition at Dort. He came over. I thought Dort jumped A to B and fouled him on the replay. That was absolutely not the case. Lou Dort just has a massive barrel chest, and that is your best rim protecting weapon. But just for uh just for emphasis, he then came down and blocked Neesmith totally cleanly as well. Thunder push it up, and it's a 3-point game at this point with about minute 30. And Shea is like, oh, he's feeling like, oh, we should burn clock. And he's like, no, wait, it's only a 3-point game, and I got Obi Toppin on me. So he goes right through Obi Toppin for the layup. No way that happens if that's Miles Turner, by the way. And they're up 5. And then this was, to me, was the other huge key play here, the one that you would probably point to as like the biggest mistake that they made, which again is like not that big of a mistake.
Well, so I want to go back to the last play for a second. Once
Yeah.
there's a statistical thing, the Thunder only made 2 field goals in the last 5 minutes, and this was the last one. They don't make any. They did actually. I believe they don't
Yeah,
score.
but they only had 2 more possessions after this too.
That's true. That's true.
Unless you want to count the 0.3.
Which I
did they?
They didn't.
Yeah,
They never
so
touched
they.
it.
Yeah. At the end, they never touched it, but
Because Turner.
so they. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, they had the Pascal block on Shea, which was another pretty good shot, and then the Jalen Williams miss and the offensive rebound. So they had 3 more shots, 2 possessions.
3 more shots, 2 possessions. I think is a good way of thinking about it. And so let's get back to the last possession. So it's a 5-point. It's a 5-point lead after Shea gets the driving finish on Obi Toppin. Exactly the right decision. You're only up 3. It's a good opportunity. They actually got something in transition. And so Alex Caruso goes for a steal on Andrew
This
Nembhard.
is after Nembhard, though, was like pretty vulnerable. I think it might have even gotten tipped initially, just over the half court line. And so like Caruso had a pretty decent chance of the steal.
He had a decent chance of it. And I brought up a couple of possessions before that Nembhard had to drive it. It should have been a turnover, and he didn't turn it over. So he'd had some issues with the ball. But Caruso gets called for the foul, I believe correctly so. And the Pacers are in the bonus. That is a non-shooting foul, but they're in the bonus. So it was only, and this is a small but significant parallel to that collapse they had against Denver, only 5 seconds had elapsed off the clock after the Shea make. And so in only 5 seconds, they get 2 free throws. Andrew Nembhard makes both of those.
And even one of those, like the first one, barely rimmed in. That was like way off and just somehow curled around it. And again, just showing you how crazy some of these margins can be for these comebacks that the Pacers keep making. And you wonder how much of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, both for them and for the team that they're going against at this point. But regardless, again, Shea gets a great drive to the basket. I think they went at Halliburton and pick and roll again. And he got released to the basket. And certainly the Thunder strategy all game was, if Michael Turner is not there, you go to the basket. And Siakam just came over and made a great play for the block on him, and and that's a shot that you would like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to take, and they ran the time down reasonably well. And also, even though he missed at the rim, the Thunder, as they did all game, did a great job of getting back. And Andrew Nembhard decided that he was going to try to go one-on-one for a step-back three to tie the game against Cason Wallace after a switch when they had gotten Shai onto Pascal Siakam. I thought they should have thrown the ball to Pascal Siakam, even though it was a three-point game. And Nembhard was like, no, I just made a step back. And he's made some massive shots in his career, right? He had that deep one against Milwaukee in the comeback there. And obviously the one against the Knicks last year too. But this is going up against Cason Wallace, their best defender, when your best isolation option is being guarded by Shai, was not the right decision. But he takes this difficult step back, and Shai blows the box out on Siakam. And this is another example of the never stopping for the Pacers. A lot of guys would be like, oh, I had the matchup. This guy just went into his bag. He took this terrible shot. What was he thinking? They kind of sulk. Pascal Siakam, nope, I'm running right to the offensive glass. I'm going right through Shai. And he got himself an easy layup to get it within one.
Yeah, and they could have gone for a two, like at the beginning of the possession, because there's still enough time, and Siakam makes that with 48 left. And so you're only down one with 48 seconds left. That means you can play defense straight up, which they do. And
yeah, I had to play defense straight up a lot of times. I mean, again, I thought the Thunder executed this pretty well. They would get it back with 48. You don't want to allow them to get the 2-for-1 at that point. So you run the time down more with a 1 point difference. And because they're going to have to go again when they get the ball, you will get the last shot. What you can't do is you will have a chance to get a 2-for-1 if you run the time down enough. Shai tried to drive against Nembhard, didn't really get anywhere, had to kick it out to J-Dub. He drove, got his man in the air, decent look, probably like a 40%, 45% shot on the right lane line, bounces off the rim, nobody there to rebound it cleanly for Indiana, and Caruso and Wallace bat it around. Siakam tries to run it down. He falls down as he's grabbing the ball, and it's out of bounds. Thunder ball. Challenged by Rick Carlisle. What did you make of the challenge decision and the outcome?
Totally reasonable challenge decision, because the upside is so high. If they call a foul, the Pacers were in the bonus. So that would have been, it would have been Siakam free throws, but it would have been free throws. And
so he could have made the first one, and then some crazy lane violation or non-lane violation shit would happen on the second one, and it would have worked out for the Pacers. So
sure. And so
high upside.
And yeah, you don't worry about the foul to Cason Wallace. And so the decision, especially this late in the game, like you don't know how many other opportunities you're going to have. It is a significant call, because also not only is it the free throw, but also the Thunder having the ball. Though if you lose the challenge, they have it with 14 left, you're still going to get. It's not like it's a fresh 24 in that circumstance. And so I agree with the decision to do it, even if you're not sure it's going to be successful. And then in terms of the mechanics of the call itself, to me, it was a really close call. So there's definitely contact from Cason Wallace's right arm on Siakam as he's trying to establish. And Siakam is in better position.
Yeah. On his body, though, not on his hands.
On his body.
Yeah. He's reaching for the ball, basically, and he kind of got him with his shoulder a little bit.
And so I was kind of persuaded by what you said, which is basically, so I think in the, if you were calling it blind, and we disagreed on this, that I would probably call it a foul. Because I thought it affected Siakam's path to the ball. Siakam had the advantageous position, so it made a material difference, and he went out of bounds in part because of the contact. However, the point that you made, which I think was a really good one, there's been a big thread in these playoffs of how much deference do you give to the original call. And so I thought it was 51-49, 50 and a half, 49 and a half for it to be a foul versus not. But that's not how you're supposed to evaluate it. How you're supposed to evaluate it is there enough to overturn it? And that is the truth. Even if I think it was a foul, it shouldn't have been overturned, and it wasn't, because the call on the floor stands. It was so tight. And so even though if it were in the abstract, I would have called the foul, which they didn't. I still support not overturning it.
Yeah, and I mean, to me too, I threw in an extra component as well, that with them being the bonus, calling that foul to give them a chance to take the lead without having to do anything I just that in particular would not sit well with me. You need, and again, this goes into the deference of the call on the floor, but you need there to be more there to be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna send you to the free throw line when you didn't even have to dribble the ball over half court. To me, that really would have not sat well. I understand your point, which I think is a good one, which is you call it the way you call it when it's either a foul or not. And I didn't even think it really was that much of a foul, but I think it would have been especially egregious in this circumstance. So the new rule, I guess not new anymore, it's been around for like 10 years now, of resetting the shot clock to 14 meant that there was still an 8-second differential. And we were talking about it right away. All right, what if they miss here? They're going to call timeout. They're not 8 seconds. That's like a pretty interesting time whether to call it or not. And so Shea he doesn't even try to involve anyone in a screening action because he wants to run the time down as much as possible. I actually might not have been quite as worried about that specifically. I might have just tried to run like the play that I wanted to run. Now, the other thing about an ISO is you're very unlikely to turn it over, and you can also just like get to a spot that you want to. And I thought he got a decent look for that situation against Nembhard. It wasn't great, good defense by Nembhard, but Shea was not challenged. He was inside of 15 feet. He's kind of got knocked backwards a little bit, but that was a good shot for him off the back rim, but it was lined up.
Well,
and Neesmith got the rebound, yeah.
Well, and not only I'll just bring up Neesmith. I thought Neesmith did a nice job understanding down and distance, and he kind of went over to help to make things a little bit harder on Shea, and then that also put him in position for the rebound eventually.
Yeah, nice rebound by him. He initially outlet the ball to Toppin, and finally they got it to Haliburton. It did seem like OKC was very concerned about running back and getting matched up, which I understand. But I think they could have maybe gotten into contact with Haliburton a little bit more. They took like 3 seconds or so to even get it to Haliburton in 2 passes. And then Haliburton, left side of the floor, started going to his right. And he had Cason Wallace on him. Cason Wallace is one of the not many guys I would rather have in that situation guarding Tyrese than him. And although Tyrese Wallace, one of his best things is getting into guys' bodies, and transition, Tyrese was able to get to his spot a little bit more, but he forced him inside the arc. And Caruso actually was kind of lurking. He was looking like he was going to come help. And Siakam, this is again just like a little. This is where the coaching and the system comes into play, because the Pacers, they're always doing something. They're moving out of the way. Someone comes close to me, I'm either going to cut away, I'll screen for him and slip out real quick. There's always another action. There's always something. They're always moving. And because Pascal Siakam saw Tyrese Haliburton coming, he cut hard to the basket. Caruso had to respect that. He backed away, and that gave Tyrese the spot to get his shot off. And we talked about it going back to 2000. We did the scouting report on him, that like he shoots this weird shot. Like, can he even shoot a jumper? Like, and when you saw it on film, you're like, this is terrible. Like he shoots his 3-pointer as a set shot, but then he jumps every time. As soon as he gets inside the arc, he jumps, and he like kind of just like twists his wrist behind the ball and shoots it almost on the way down. But if you look at the numbers, he is an awesome mid-range shooter. This is a little outside of his comfort zone. He normally would take this from 15, 17 feet, or he would take a 3, but he didn't have that luxury. And he hit an awesome shot over Cason Wallace to win the game for the Indiana Pacers.
The 6th shot that Tyrese Haliburton has made to tie or take the lead with 90 seconds or less left in overtime or regulation in a game so far these playoffs.
Dude, he's hit 4 of the most iconic shots in playoff history in this playoffs. He had the layup against Giannis. He had the ridiculous one against Ty Jerome. That was a 3 to win it. He had that crazy bouncer in game 1, and he had this one.
Yeah.
There have been maybe 6 or 7 shots that are, this wasn't technically a buzzer beater because there's 0.3 left, but it basically was. It ended the game. 0.3 that the Thunder couldn't get anything after that. It's technically enough time for a catch and shoot, but not really. Like if you try to shoot a 3, you won't get it off at 0.3. Derek Fisher, the 0.4 is sort of the exception that proves the rule there, and that's 0.4, not 0.3, and they've changed the rules a little bit in terms of the timing since then. So, yeah, this is, and we'll see what happens in the rest of the series, obviously, but like the fact that he has 4 of these shots And then he had the other tying layup in the game 5 comeback as well before the overtime.
Mm-hmm.
The first comeback that they had in that game 5 against Milwaukee before they had the second even more ridiculous comeback. Like, it's absolutely unreal what this guy has done in the clutch. Like there's nobody has ever had this good of a clutch postseason. Like as far as just like at the very end again, I don't think end of games, you want to count it as the last 5 minutes, whatever you want to count it as. Nobody has ever hit this many like game winning or game tying type of shots in a postseason. This is the best. We are seeing that right now.
And I think that the other kind of wild stat that relates to the close is that the Indiana Pacers never led until Tyrese Halliburton shot. They either tied or trailed for the first 47 minutes, 59.7 seconds of this game. And then they took the lead with 0.3 left. And
It's crazy.
That's never stopped, never stopping. That's all of these different components. And I think that is a reasonable way to kind of go into the meat of the game, because there are reasons why it was still in reach. But the Indiana Pacers committed 20 turnovers in the first half, 11 of which were live ball, which is just astonishing. It's impossible. And so you have that, and you're just like, how is that survivable? We'll talk about how it was, but they have those turnovers. And they're only, say only, but they're only down 12 at that point. And so that's just one of those things you think about. And we'll talk about how the turnovers happened and how they didn't happen in the second half. But the idea of, okay, we're not out of it, we could still keep pushing, even though you have all of these things, much of which are of your own, like your own failings, that you just keep, you trust the system, you keep working, and you get back into it, because seemingly they always have.
So let's talk about some of just the major factors of this game. We'll just play a little game here. I don't know that we need to tell just like the whole story. We can get into something like the nitty gritty in terms of rotations, that sort of things. But I think we'll get through most of it through this exercise. So we can alternate here discussing kind of major trends from this game and how much we think they're going to continue. Indiana turnovers.
The Thunder will continue to provide pressure, but I don't think that pressure will be as successful as it was in the first half, in part because that was historically anomalous. I mean, 20 turnovers, it was 12 steals, 12 of them live ball in a single half. Not only would that not continue just because it never would, regression to the mean, but because it didn't in the second half. And so the Pacers only turned it over 5 times in the second half, and only 2 of those 5 were steals, were live ball turnovers. So I think that the truth is between the two. And so, like, the overall Indiana's turnover rate in this game was 25%, 24.8 if we're going to be specific. I think the truth is maybe somewhere around. So the Thunder were like 17% this season, 18% in the postseason before tonight. I think it's probably somewhere around that. And this is the kind of the way we could talk about it, is that one of the things that was most fascinating about and this has been true for the Thunder overall, or for the Thunder, but also for the Pacers in these playoffs, is who committed these turnovers. Halliburton actually committed 3 of the 20, which is more than he usually does in a whole game, much less a half. But Miles Turner had, in the first half alone, Miles Turner had 4. Nesmith had 4. Obi Toppin had 3 turnovers in the first half. That kind of stuff and we saw the Pacers adjust to it. That's unsustainable.
It is unsustainable, and they did that they didn't blitz Halliburton quite the way that I thought they would. It wasn't the game plan against Luka necessarily, but they were. Remember, part of what the Pacers do is Halliburton, he doesn't necessarily have to get double teamed to get off the ball. Part of his genius is that he'll get the ball to a teammate who's in an advantageous situation. There are, a few plays where that worked pretty well, like Turner got a couple of early rolls to the basket. But generally, once those guys got the ball with like a little advantage or maybe a little bit later in the shot clock than they would have liked, it was a disaster. Neesmith, Turner, Toppin, those guys were all just having awful turnovers, throwing the ball away, getting caught on the baseline, guys sneaking up behind him, dribbling into traffic, all that. And I do think that the Pacers were able to chill at the pace a little bit more. I thought that running so much more through Nembhard in the second half was a part of that too, where they weren't necessarily playing the beautiful game as much, but they also felt like there are some things that they could attack. Now, you mentioned it, right? I mean, the turnover game, it's not only how many times are they going to turn it over, right? They didn't come anywhere close to the record, which was what, 35 by the Warriors.
Was
Imagine 35 turnovers.
it
I mean,
was
they played at
I
a
believe it
faster
was
pace back then,
I
but
believe it was 36, and the crazy thing is that the
Jesus.
Bullets, that the Warriors committed those turnovers and won the game.
Yeah. Well, you could only dribble with the heel of your hand back then. So is that, and you could still steal it with everything else. So, but the other thing though, because this is what you really have to consider in this is, yeah, the Pacers may turn it over less, but are the Thunder going to struggle to score on those live ball turnovers as much? So they had 14 steals. The Thunder had 7 points off those 14 steals. Now,
That's
some of
incredible.
that was the Pacers getting back, right? Like some of these are just late in the clock, like a couple of Shea mid-rangers that were missed. But they all so of all of those plays, they only had one pick six, which was the J-Dub dunk in the second half. You had Caruso going in, getting an offensive foul on Neesmith. And so so they had 3 turnovers off those 14 steals, 2 missed layups, 2 missed mid-rangers, 4 missed threes, and then the only points they scored were a Dort 3, 2 Chet free throws, and that J-Dub dunk. The Pacers are good at getting back. I don't think they're going to turn it over as many times. They also, some of their turnovers were just, losing the ball out of bounds or something like that, where you couldn't get a fast break. But OKC will have more than 7 points off of steals, I would say, in most of the games in the rest of this series. And so that is definitely, I think when you put those two things together, I do think it actually is like slightly advantage OKC. You would think. Now, you could also say, well, hey, they kind of shut down the OKC half court offense, but that's a different topic. We will get to
Mhm.
that. Here's my next one. The effect of the Pacers' pressure. How did that whole tete-a-tete go? And how do you see that playing out the rest of the series?
I think that something that you keyed on, and then we each had different points kind of on this idea, was that yours was that the way to attack the Pacers' pressure was to just push the ball, and the
Yeah.
Thunder did
If
that
you have
really
the
well
personnel,
if you had the personnel.
which I thought
And
they did.
which they and I thought that for the most part that worked out very well for OKC. They were able to generate advantages where maybe they would not have otherwise. And my point on it was that the Thunder have this weird collection of players who are simultaneously not good enough to run an offense, but have experience or capability to handle the ball. So like Alex Caruso shouldn't run a ton of pick and roll, but he can dribble the ball when somebody's, especially if it's not the other team's best defender, is pressuring him. And like even Chet Holmgren could do that. And I think that Holmgren is one of the potential exceptions to this because Holmgren, he can do this. Like that is something within his skill set. He's a better ball handler. Not only is he a better ball handler than most guys his size, but most guys his size can't pressure the ball in the way that Smalls can. But there were a few times where that general theory worked out very well for the Thunder. I think they generated some really nice chances and everything like that. There were a few, especially later, where you still want to do that, but there needs to be something from Daignault or the coaching staff more broadly to be like, hey, if you don't have it, you don't have to take the shot. And Holmgren was 2 of 9 from the field, 0 for 1 from 3. So he was 2 for 8 on twos. And some of those were
Is that 2 for 8 on even like hitting the rim on layups against Miles Turner?
well,
I mean, he
and
had like one dunk.
yeah,
But yeah, he tried to just like take him one on one, and it went
yeah.
really poorly.
And so some of those were in those pressure plus situations where you pressure and then you get past the pressure, I guess we call it. But you're not all the way past. It's not like you're wide open. You're going in for an Turner's still there, And then I think that there's a little bit of a potential spillover with Holmgren in particular, where for whatever reason, he thought he could attack Miles Turner one on one with a live dribble. And no, that is not something that Holmgren, at least right now, is good enough to do. I've brought up the comparison that maybe he can make the Evan Mobley leap. He sure as shit ain't Evan Mobley right now. And so I think that there were a few times where you could argue that this empowerment led to a little bit of tunnel vision and eventually were shot. But I still think overall it's the right approach.
Yeah, I think so. And you just note what the matchup is, right? Like if you got if you've got Aaron Neesmith on you, I'm gonna say no. No, don't try and do it. If you're gonna try to pressure you with Obi Toppin, oh yes, by all means. And also the other thing too, and I think I don't know if this was specific in their mind, but I did notice it more. When Turner is off the floor, then that's also a time when the strategy of attacking the pressure can be better because there's no one to actually stop you in a rim protecting role once you get there. And so, I mean, that's what we talked about, right? Like JW, you're gonna try to pressure him. Like he's one of the fastest guys in the league in a straight line. And Shea, they would sort of like set a little screen in the backcourt, but they weren't gonna try to like get another guy up into the backcourt too and really bother him because the Knicks didn't have anyone who could like dribble the ball really fast. That's not a skill
Mhm.
set. And then, like Caruso is a former one guard. Like when he was in college, he was like a very physical, athletic driver. I thought his attacks generally worked pretty well. And Casey Wallace, he's someone that I feel like in the right matchup, again, Ben Shepherd or Matherin's another guy who I think physically is not something you want to try, but if it's someone like Toppin, if it's someone like Shepherd, McConnell too, zone is just like kind of undersized. Um, so I thought that that was the right approach, and I think it's also the right approach just to be for a mentality standpoint too of just continuing to be aggressive. We saw the Knicks, the Bucks, Cleveland most of all, just shrinking, trying not to lose. Oh, we got to get it across. We just got to get it across. And to have a mentality of like, oh, you want to pressure us? You want to play fast? Oh, we're gonna fucking play fast. Like that, you are gonna make some mistakes, which can happen. But I thought overall that's the right mentality. And again, particularly when Turner is off the floor, which if Rick Carlisle is gonna take him off the floor, and he did have the 6 turnovers, that wasn't great. He still managed to be +8 despite having 6 turnovers. Uh, I think that's something that they should continue to do. All right, what else you got as far as like some major things from the first game, and will they continue or not?
Using Case and Wallace as a screener with Tyrese Halliburton guarding him.
Yeah, I mean they went after Tyrese quite a bit, particularly in the second half. I thought to me he held up relatively well until some in the fourth quarter when Shea was able to get some splits or Wallace was able to get some rolls to the basket. Caruso too, they put him on him some. Uh, Dort as well, like that was. I mean, people were talking about maybe they could put Siakam on Dort or something. Like no, it's got to be Halliburton. There's nowhere else for Halliburton to hide because
Yeah.
now that might be one reason, Danny, because they didn't play the two bigs a single second. Maybe that's a reason to go with the two bigs, at least a little.
Because it
Or
changes
I would
it
even,
changes the assignments. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I would do too is just why not go two bigs when Halliburton's out of the game? Number one, try to entice Rick Carlisle into playing Thomas Bryant or, I mean, probably not Tony Bradley. I don't know how hurt he is instead of Toppin. Like as much as Toppin has flaws defensively, he's still just a better player than Thomas Bryant. So try to go with the two big. Sorry, I'm getting ahead into the adjustments, but I just thought of it
Mhm.
is go with the two bigs when Halliburton's off the floor, or when maybe even more so when Turner is off the floor.
Well,
So
and
you're just not, and then you kill him on the glass, and you can run more stuff through Hartenstein as well, and you can just say, yeah, they're just never going to score because we just have these two bigs on the floor and they have no shooting.
Well, and particularly because the Halliburton off the 4 minutes means TJ McConnell is on. I want to talk about that more later. On this, the other basic part that works really well with that is it gets one of your better players on the floor more. And so if you have Hartenstein and you have Chet out there, then you can kind of go to some of those competitive lineups. Um, while we're kind of on the subject of backup bigs and everything like that, Thomas Bryant defending Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in the action, whether it's like defending him in a switch or an ISO or just being a part of the action, is a disaster for the Pacers. He just can't do that. He got one of them. I thought he did a decent job, but just got beat anyway. But the thing, so I teased this a little bit throughout the early part of the pod. The big process thing that I thought the Thunder got wrong in the last 5 minutes was you brought up how they were bringing Halliburton's man, Case Wallace, into the action. We talked about that in the flow. There was a name that we didn't mention much in terms of this, which is Obi Toppin. And Obi Toppin played 3 of the last 5 minutes. Miles Turner only played 2 of the last 5 minutes. And he was involved on the play when Shea drove in transition, but they never really called him up. And Obi Toppin is bad defensively in a number of different ways, but that is one of them. And so theoretically, he can't move his feet. It's not like you're drawing him out because he's a good help defender. He's a terrible help defender. But I thought they were zealous on Halliburton, who I thought did pretty well, and they just weren't going after Toppin, who is worse.
The other thing I might consider too, I would even consider calling up Siakam, because if you can move the ball, then there's nobody who's
Right.
going to do anything to. I mean, Nemhard and Neesmith are okay, but I think I trust Jalen Williams getting into the lane on a 4-on-3 there, and maybe Shea even could blow by Siakam at the point of attack in
Oh,
that coverage.
and one thing we also know is that Obi Toppin is pretty bad executing a double team because that happened a number of different times in their previous series, and he's just not good at sealing the angles off. So it's another way that you can get downhill.
Okay, next topic.
I don't really have a framing for this, but the TJ McConnell minutes.
Yeah, the Halliburton off minutes, the bench minutes.
Well,
He was -13.
the unfortunate, in my opinion, to the detriment of the Pacers, the Halliburton off minutes and the TJ McConnell minutes on were not the same because McConnell played with Halliburton, and I have zero idea why that is the case because McConnell, when you have Halliburton on the floor, all he does is take things away.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they just want to push the pace a little bit. I mean, I think overall the numbers since they've been teammates are not bad with them playing together, but also this is the playoffs against the Thunder. I mean, I think they just having Halliburton on the floor just as a threat, absorbing a matchup, right? It's kind of the same principle in some ways as Ty Jerome playing with Garland or Mitchell, where the best defender is always going to be on those guys. And so then McConnell maybe can work, but the Thunder don't really have bad defenders for him to take advantage of necessarily. I didn't think he played so badly. But yeah,
But
that was his minutes in the fourth too. I like end of the third, beginning of the fourth. Like that was the Thunder, or sorry, the Pacers had a bunch of plays in the second half where they just kind of kicked the ball around, or someone was about to get it stolen, and the Thunder like went for the steal, didn't get it. When in a normal situation, go for a steal, not gambling, and then the Pacers somehow retain possession and then like throw it to someone for a layup or a three. So they probably had 4 or 5 of those plays in the second half. A lot of those were, I think, in the TJ minutes. But yeah, I mean, again, like they're not going to change up how they're playing. They're not going to make Nemhard the backup point guard. He also is their main defender on Shea. So that's probably the next thing to talk about is Shea. He was 14 of 30 from the field, 11 of 24 on twos, shot 3 of 6 on threes. He had a big three, actually, as they got it within 6 right at the end of the third when Ben Shepherd, who can't guard him, just didn't press up on him with the clock expiring, which was really pretty maddening. And so, yeah, but Shea was only +3, only took 8 free throws. A lot of them came late when the Pacers clearly fouled him. He had one play where actually he had this weird shove with Nembhard. I don't know if they're like
oh yeah,
that was like them being buddies or what. Or Nembhard probably said something to him about how he made a BS play to try to draw the foul, which I thought was Nembhard didn't really think fouled him. Nembhard tried to get him on the chair pull. Shea got fooled by it and then still had the balance to make the layup anyway another time. But how do you feel like all of the defense against Shea went in the 39 minutes and 34 seconds that he played?
I thought that for significant portions of the game, they did a reasonable job of making Shea work. But there are certain players, certain situations where Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is just going to cook those guys like Thomas Bryant, Obi Toppin in particular. And
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing that I thought looked the worst, was that just if they could get a good screen set. I thought like Shea working with Hartenstein was great, because then number one, it was often Bryant, but number two, Hartenstein was going to lay the wood on the screen
exactly.
in a way that Chet wasn't necessarily. Like Nemhard, Neesmith, like those guys did a pretty good job getting on the screen. I would try maybe a little more Neesmith like right at the end of the game, because I think if it goes to an ISO, I like Neesmith guarding it better than Nemhard in an ISO. But you also want Neesmith on J Dub, and they largely shut down J Dub, so it's not like that was a bad decision necessarily by Carlisle. I mean, they held him down pretty well in the half court offense.
I think they did. And Shea didn't get to the line a ton. A couple of his free throws were fouls in the bonus, so they weren't, And there was one that was a bad Nemhard play where he kind of went for a steal, and the Thunder were in the bonus and gave Shea two easy ones. I think those were Shea's two first free throws of the game. So yeah, I thought overall that stuff was it, and the doubling, it produced some advantages. Shea also split them really well, but he can, that's something that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander can just pull off. So I think they can tighten up a bit, but I thought they did a totally credible job considering their personnel.
Yeah, not like it wasn't so bad that you couldn't overcome it. Now
Right.
there are some other things that maybe if they had gone right, then you also can't give this up. But yeah, 14 and 30 from him when you're not just like totally overhelping, not giving up a kind of corner threes, not giving up dunks. I thought Shea actually, his passing out of pick and roll, he threw 2 or 3 beautiful times to the roll man that I didn't actually know he had in the arsenal, frankly. But uh so again, if I'm the Thunder, I would love to get Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in pick and roll against the Pacers centers, and Hartenstein is probably the best equipped to do that. And Hartenstein also can really hurt Indiana on the offensive glass.
Well, and while we're talking
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
Hartenstein, I thought that his presence was also very important in terms of stabilizing the offense in the non-Shea minutes. And they didn't have him in that capacity for a lot of the season, both because Hartenstein
Yeah,
had an injury and because Chet Holmgren wasn't available. So Hartenstein had to start, so you couldn't fit him in. And his screening, he's not the same type of player as Steven Adams, but like his screening helped WWE. He had a beautiful Gortat screen that opened up a J-Dub finish.
yeah.
And he also can be a pretty cheeky passer. He can hit that floater at times. And so that is a place that Hartenstein can really add some value, because, and why I brought up Steven Adams is because a screener can really help a limited shot creation unit, because they can create good looks via being big and laying the wood. And I thought that Hartenstein made a huge difference making so the Thunder were outscored by 4 in the relatively short minutes that Shea was out there, but I thought that for the most part
That
it
Shea was
looked
out there.
that so Shea was +3. No, Shea was out of the game.
Oh, okay.
And so that but I thought overall, like the offense looked survivable. I think is probably the way that I would put it. And I
Yeah,
haven't felt that
but
all
they.
this
I mean, I
weekend.
will say this: they need to kick the shit out of them in the non-Halliburton minutes. I think
That's
even the
true.
non-Shea minutes, most of those aren't going to include Halliburton.
Hmm.
So they should win those minutes. To me,
Yeah,
I think they
and
have
but
more depth. Like they don't have these players like Ben Shepherd or Bryant out there,
well,
Toppin, who have, I think, too many weaknesses to be like high level finals players.
but to me, they should be winning those minutes on the defensive end, and then getting, they get
Sure.
stuff in transition, and then you try to cobble enough decent half court possessions where that's not killing you. Like that to me is the way that you put those minutes together overall. And I thought that for the most part they were kind of in that vein. But you are right to bring up that a fair number of the Shea out minutes were also Halliburton out, and then that creates a significant competitive advantage for them.
Yeah. So another thing we can say too is just the backup big thing, whether it's Bryant, whether it's Toppin. What does it look like? Hartenstein's a good player. I think they want to have him out there for some of the reasons you talked about. Are they too worried that if they go Toppin and Siakam, that Hartenstein can't be out there defensively? I would try that. I would not be, like I said, I would even consider going with the 2 bigs during that
Mhm.
group and just say, yeah, like we're never going to let you get anything at the rim with this group. And then we've got guys to run pick and roll if you want to. And then we'll always have someone around the rim to just take advantage of your lack of rebounding, lack of rim protection. Like, yeah, Obi Toppin, you want to have Obi Toppin guarding. We'll have whoever Toppin's guarding, either Chet or Hardenstein, set the screen. And a lot of that even would be with Shea out there too. Let's not forget. Because Turner's not going to be out there all the time. And you want to hedge with Toppin, then Shea will split that, or you double team, and then we'll get either Chet or Hardenstein coming downhill and able to find the other on an alley-oop. Like, I would love to see that. Now, is Mark Daigneault too scared to do that? If they go Toppin, it's like, they could space us out. If you got McConnell in there too, I'd say no. I think you should try it. But that is a fascinating consideration here for the rest of this series. How about this one? Thunder 20-42 at the rim overall, as we noted, 10 out of 27 when Turner is on the floor. Continue or not continue?
Especially considering some of that was misses in transition. I think that the general idea.
Yeah. Well, only 3 of those were off of steals.
Off of steals, but
and
nobody,
nobody ran off of misses in this game. Neither team did, and particularly not OKC.
Yeah, the Thunder, the Clean the Glass version of the stat, they had a 6.9% transition frequency off of live rebounds, which is astonishingly low. And credit to the Pacers.
Yeah, and the Thunder did it. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, did the Pacers? I don't think the Pacers got a single quick bucket off of a Thunder make in this game.
I don't recall one. No,
I mean, maybe there was one where like they kind of got the matchup scrambled. They eventually worked it around and something, but it wasn't just, oh, hey, they've now scored 4 seconds later after you shot a layup going into the cameras.
But most of the time, the Indiana Pacers, Siakam had a huge block late. They really only have one rim protector on their team. They don't even have a ton of supplemental rim protection most of the time. So I think that the Thunder can do better. They can do better than they did on that front. And so they took, and I think, so I think it can be better than it was, though I think Miles Turner can be a very good rim protector. So I don't think this is the huge anomaly, but I do think that they can do better, especially if we were, depending on which version of the stat we're going to use, the Thunder really, really struggled. So they were 3 of 12 on shots in the paint outside of 5 feet. Like, they have guys who could upper paint, but upper paint's a little different when we're using.
And those, I mean, that's basically going to be Hartenstein, Shea, J-Dub, all of whom are effective from that range.
Exactly. And so you could see that get better as well. And for example, like even the Pacers, who I don't think have as many guys who are good in that space, they were 5 of 12 in this game.
Yeah, even Shea was only 5 of 10 at the rim himself. He's usually a pretty good finisher if he's going to shoot it there.
I have one for you.
Yeah.
The Indiana Pacers took 16 corner threes in game 1.
Yes.
And they made 10 of those 16 corner threes.
Well, and moreover, in the second half, they were 7 of 9 on those. 5 of 5 left corner, including that huge Nesmith one that we talked about. And that was really the biggest thing to me that stood out about the health of their offense. I mean, they were better getting to the rim too in the second half. I mean, their shot chart in the first half was really bad. Really bad. They got 7 corner threes. They were 3-7 on corner threes, but they only got 5 shots at the rim in the first half. And that, even more so than the turnovers, is what was really, really concerning to me. And so we are working on this stat right now, but it's in beta form. We are working feverishly to try to actually release at least some of this stuff live during games to you guys before the end of the finals. Not sure if we're going to get there, but we are debuting this new luck adjustment stat. This is an in-game kind of quick and dirty, so we don't have access to the camera data. We'll eventually have also a stat that looks at it with the contested, uncontested data, but that's not available to us until the next day. But based on the shooter, based on where the shot is from, and based on where in the shot clock it is, those are all signal for projecting what the percentage is that a jumper will go in. We don't apply it to shots in the paint. We don't apply it to turnovers, and we're not doing the if he missed this, then maybe there would have been an offensive rebound. We're not, this is very quick and dirty. So, but the expected score from this game, if you just normalize the free throws and the jumpers to what would have been expected, would have been Thunder 111, Pacers 102. But the Pacers really, where they made up a bunch is obviously that corner 3-point shooting. They were plus 10.5 points over expected there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing where this isn't part of our adjustment, we do note that these shots in the paint occur, right? If we adjusted the shots in the paint up, like we don't adjust that because those are just more subject to a contest. And like that's, you don't want to get into that. The defense can control that much more
Right.
than they can when you're shooting on jumpers. Jumpers, a lot of times it's, well, if you can get it off, it's going to be at least a semi-decent look most of the time, unless it's late clock, in which case we round that down. So even with the Thunder shooting so terribly in the paint, and Pacers weren't great, they were 17-29, but they got 47 shots to the paint, made 23 of them. The Thunder still were just way better. Now, a big part of that is because they won the possession game so badly with the turnovers, right? Like if that didn't happen, then it would probably be pretty close to even. So I think, the Thunder to me outplayed the Pacers a reasonable amount. Their inability to score in the paint to me is the one thing that stands out the most among either teams, other than the Pacers turning it over 24 times. But as I said, like that between that and then the scoring off the turnovers, I think that's going to even out like reasonably well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is like the Pacers, are they going to keep the Thunder a pretty decent finishing team? The Pacers are not a great rim protected team. Are they gonna like keep holding the Thunder below 50% in the paint and below 50% at the rim? I have a lot of skepticism of that.
So just because I thought of it, one of the other stats we got asked about doing the playback show was what was the Pacers offensive rating on possessions where they didn't turn the ball over. So I did it for the full game, not just for the first half. In the full game, and remember, we don't usually use this filter, so this number is not, it's not an
No.
apples to apples to anything we ever use, because you take all
Yeah.
those possessions out. They had a 144 offensive rating in possessions where they didn't, because they had 111 points on 77 non-turnover possessions in the whole game.
Yeah. Well, and also it's not apples to apples because OKC is willing to give up better shots in exchange for forcing more turnovers.
Absolutely.
They can have their cake and eat it too, maybe more than any defense in NBA history in that respect, except for maybe like, the Tony Allen Memphis Grizzlies. But yeah, I mean, if they weren't so concerned about forcing turnovers, then they wouldn't give up all these corner threes. But the Pacers have been a great shooting team in these playoffs.
While we're talking about turnovers, I forgot one of my other favorite things that OKC did to force turnovers. They were attacking the rebound as soon as it was made. Whether it was a Pacers offensive rebound, the few that they got in the early part of the game, that was some of Miles Turner's turnovers. Like he would get the ball, and usually it was Caruso, but it was somebody's hand would be there immediately, and players aren't used to that. And we also saw it on the defensive glass. There were a couple plays where J-Dub or Caruso, or one point it was Case and Wallace. So maybe it was the guy who was kind of a go guy in that circumstance, would just make a little play for the ball before they make their way back. And it's not a circumstance that players are used to being vulnerable. And I thought that was, the Pacers did a much better job adjusting to that in the second half. But there were like at least 5 of their turnovers were immediately after a caught rebound.
A few other things we can point to. 13 assists on 39 field goals for OKC. And again, some of that was just, hey, you got a guy in front of you can take. We don't think you can protect the rim. We're going to drive. Well, they missed a bunch of layups. I mean, I would say, 6 or 7 of those missed layups were just like, yeah, they smoked it. As where you take the snapshot when they shoot, you're like, oh yeah, that's going in. Chad in particular had a couple of those that were pretty ugly. J-Dub had a couple of those too. But you do have to say the 3-pointers they were 11 of 30, and a lot of those were off the dribble. So what I did like from OKC is that I thought they forced certain players on Indiana to be shooting threes maybe a little bit earlier in the possession. They would have liked off of one pass. but I think Indiana's just going to be comfortable shooting that. Obi Toppin, we didn't even talk about him. His 3-point shooting, 5-8. He again benefited on a fair number of those. The ball kind of bounced around. They almost turned it over. It ended up with Obi Toppin. Here's a 3.
Well, Andy
And
benefited from the
yeah,
Thunder pinching in from the above the break, and so
yeah.
they were helping off of him finding that pass. And I think that the Pacers will actually even get better at seeing those because the familiarity. I think that the McConnell minutes will get worse as the Thunder understand what he does and doesn't do. But I think that the Pacers activating those instincts, the stuff that's hardwired into the Thunder digs, that will open up even more above the break. Now, Toppin might not hit as many higher proportion of those as he did in game one, but I think they can generate those shots pretty consistent.
Halliburton, 6 of 13. Obviously had the game winner, 6 assists. Not a lot of driving from him, and he wasn't even featured that much either. They're trying to deny him. Nemhard was brilliant down the end, but he's only 4 of 11 from the game. He had a couple of tough finishes, but also there were tough finishes, and he missed a few of them too. And then Siakam, 7 of 15, 6 of 13 from 2. Initially they're switching Case and Wallace onto him. That was part of the reason that they started small. They wanted Wallace to guard Tyrese Halliburton. They had J-Dub guarding Siakam. I don't think Siakam could really do much with J-Dub. But Wallace, he got into the post on him a couple times early, got a foul and a tough fadeaway that rimmed in. And those, but then, or sorry, it wasn't a foul. He just got a layup when the help was late. And so, I didn't really think that like Siakam killed their switches. Like I thought OKC's plan there on the switches was pretty good. Now, Indiana, again, if they're not turning it over, they're going to be able to get a lot more shots at the basket. And their half court offense just looked way better. They got the 9 corner threes in the second half, which is a lot. Like that's if they're not getting corner threes, then I think they're in trouble. But also OKC couldn't keep them away from the rim. Like the defense in the second half, even before you get to the turnovers, like the shot profile was awful for the Pacers in the first. I thought OKC just didn't do a good enough job of packing the paint in the same way. Like they were giving up shots at the rim. It's for some misses, but still, you have 17 shots at the rim and 9 corner threes. That is that's not good enough from the Thunder. So if that continues, we're gonna have a dogfight of a series. But I think the equilibrium will be somewhere between the first and the second half.
Yeah.
Ben Mathurin, I thought, was very solid. He was 1 of 5, but he's someone who is willing to just put his head down and go and get fouled, and he's not going to be bothered by the pressure. He's just like athletic enough and strong enough and determined enough that he's not going to be bothered there. I
Well,
guess
and
we
I
should go
think
back to Halliburton though.
no,
Yeah,
I want
sorry.
to talk about Mathurin for a second because the other thing that I
Yeah.
thought Mathurin did well defensively was so he's not great at kind of evaluating the defensively of like reading the scene and making like pattern recognition, reading stuff. But if you give him an assignment and that's all he has to do, he could do pretty well. So I thought there were times where he fought through screens reasonably well, where he's
Yeah.
physical enough, and so I think that Carlisle has gotten better, and Mathurin deserves credit for his effort and everything like that. Of putting him in a position to succeed where you give him the assignment that makes sense for him and you don't give him one that involves a lot of discretion.
Yeah, I think him guarding Shea one-on-one was actually okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was that bad. Yeah, I just wonder what they're gonna do to get Halliburton going because there wasn't even like it's not like they were like getting such advantages over what they were doing on Halliburton. Like Halliburton, yeah, he would run some pick and roll, he'd throw the pass to the next guy quickly, like move the ball, or like, hey, you're leaning the wrong way. I'll get Miles Turner in the corner for a 3. But it wasn't necessarily that like they were double teaming. A lot of that too was just that OKC was switching. And so I wonder if, is this good enough? Like this is a pretty fast-paced game. Neither team was efficient offensively. That was another thing that was pretty fascinating. Again, in part due to the steals, 55 possessions for OKC, 54 for Indiana in the first. That is a ton for any postseason game when things really slow down. And then there were 7 fewer possessions in the second half. Again, usually slower in the second half because one team's trying to run the time down a little bit, but that was somewhat palpable because the pace was so fast just due to the Pacers kicking the ball over the gym. Any other like kind of rotation stuff that stuck out to you?
I mean, we got some AJ Mitchell minutes, which I don't think were totally necessary. He's not usually going to go 0 for 3 from the field, but Mitchell, battled turf toe, basically
Yeah,
missed
I,
the
I
entire
think they
second half of the
did
series.
that just because they needed they want another ball handler against the pressure.
Yeah,
Um,
I
and
would.
ultimately, like the Pacers kind of backed off with that. Like I'm not as
Mhm.
worried about that as the Thunder, and so I would say leave him out of the rotation if you're starting to run into trouble bringing the ball up. Then yeah, you can throw him in there if you need to.
Let's see. No, I think
Yeah,
I think
Aaron
that's
Wiggins, I thought held up reasonably well defensively. If there's not that many guys who are going to just like kill him one on one, which is where he's weak. So maybe you could try to get him out there a little bit more for offense. That might be a thought.
but you might actually, this is going to sound weird, but you might actually want him out there in kind of some of the different lines because I think Matherin, like Wiggins with Matherin involved, could actually be a problem, and some of those other guys. So maybe like, would you consider Wiggins guarding Neesmith in some of those lineups just to get his offense out there on the floor?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fine. Neesmith for his part, 31 minutes. Nemhard played 32. Turner played 28. Halliburton played 39. I mean, that's a lot. But nobody else and the Pacers scoring was incredibly balanced. And getting that 5 of 8 from three from Toppin was massive. That's also what really helped them stay alive, his shooting in the non-Halliburton minutes.
Hmm.
Um, how about Isaiah Joe, his role?
I thought that they didn't do as much of the guard screening involving him. They did more of that with Case and Wallace. Of course, Wallace was closing, so that helped set those tables.
Yeah.
I thought that he was okay defensively, just kind of wasn't exploited that much and then wasn't, integrally involved in the offense. I brought up the lack of screening. So I thought he was fine. And I think that in certain circumstances they can use Joe more. I like him in just kind of some of the interstitial lineups doing some of the stuff they had Case and Wallace doing because he's such a good shooter. And I think the Pacers' communication on some of those can be at times challenging.
Yeah, they had him matched up against McConnell some, and I wonder what Joe like he is a way to try to take advantage of Halliburton defensively more. But I thought it was, and also just where Shea doesn't have to drive every single time. Although
Right.
again, like he is not Donovan Mitchell or Damian Lillard or Jalen Brunson in terms of like his physical capacity. Like he's been doing this all year, and like he's not going to get sped up, or he's not going to like waste all of his energy even getting across half court and be exhausted. Like he doesn't have to drive and just like use up all of his energy to get to spots. So I mean, maybe he'll get worn down by the end of the series. I mean, we certainly haven't seen him come close to getting worn down at all in these playoffs, but they've had a relatively easy run of it, except in the Denver series. And so that's something to keep in mind. They tried doing like a little bit of peel switching with like, and they'll do different stuff, obviously too. It's not the same thing every time. But Neesmith, for example, would come off a J Dub when they had those two guys, Shea and J Dub, both above the break, and Neesmith would come off of him. Then Nemhard would be tasked to peel back onto J Dub. They didn't really execute that well. I think that could be a decent strategy nonetheless. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Yeah, I don't know that you need Joe. I might want to do more Wiggins than Joe.
Mhm.
Just get a little bit more size out there and a little bit more ability to attack the basket. But again, I think there wasn't anything that happened where I'm just like, man, this all went terribly for the Thunder. But that's what the Pacers do. This reminded me a lot. I said it during the broadcast of Game 1 of the Cleveland series, where Cleveland like kind of controlled it a lot pretty well, and then the Pacers came back in the end. Now Pacers won that by like 10, but you felt like Cleveland's not shooting it very well. Like they'll start shooting better. They'll be fine. Pacers are shooting the shit out of it. They're still down. Come on. Pacers ended up 18 to 39 from three in this game, which I mean that's the other thing. Like when teams shoot really well from three against the Thunder, like the Thunder can look mortal. But for Indiana to be like, yeah, we had a 111 points here, a 111 offensive rating, even shooting 18 to 39. Like you got to feel okay about that with the Thunder, I suppose. And then, damn it, what was the last thing I had? I can't remember right now. It was good too. I guess we'll never know.
Well, so I think that can something to because we're not going to record between now and game 2. We'll of course broadcast that game on playback. Is the game 2 bounce back?
Wait, what? What? We're gonna take 2 days off? Weekend? We're gonna do that?
Is the game 2 bounce back? And so if the Thunder, so the home team that loses a game 1 generally dominates a game 2. And if the Thunder don't dominate game 2, then even if they win, then the alarm bell should be ringing off in OKC.
Oh, I was gonna say the game that is also similar to, of course, is game 1 against Denver for OKC,
Sure.
where
Yeah.
they led by a very similar number in the last 3 minutes. They blew it. I didn't think they blew it nearly as much in this game by making mistakes, but they controlled it throughout, basically led the whole game, and then blew it at the end on an incredibly memorable shot. Same thing as the Aaron Gordon shot in that series. So they certainly know that they could bounce back. Like OKC is not going to be like, oh, we can't recover from this emotionally. Like they've proven that they can do that. So we'll see. Is this game 1 of the Cleveland series, or is this game 1 of the Denver series? But hey, the Denver series did go 7 after all. So yeah, I would obviously change my prediction to 6 now rather than 5. So that's big news for you, since our playoff picks competition is on the line here. We do have some news before we go, and the Phoenix Suns have made a coaching hire.
They have, and they had gone down to 2 finalists, both of whom were assistants with the Cavs, and they ended up making the choice, which was many expected considering his ties to Sparty, that they hired Jordan Ott as the head coach. Now, that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that Jordan Ott is he's qualified to be a head coach. He will be a first-time head coach. He been an assistant for more than 10 years in the league, and so Ott leaves the Cavs coaching staff, goes there, and it seems like Devin Booker signed off, and so it's another coaching hire for Devin Booker, another coaching hire for Matt Ishbia.
Yeah, and Dan had it now. I mean, this was always going to be the case once Bud was fired, but 7th head coach, permanent head coach for Devin Booker, and that ties the record with Kobe. I can't remember who the other guy was, but
I think it's Reggie Miller.
Yeah. So, but anyway, those guys had like 20-year careers, and Booker has been around for this is his 11th season now, and maybe it's even his 10th season. 2015 draft, yeah, this is 10th season. So, yeah, that's and then also he basically had Jay Triano for an entire season as well. Remember, Earl Watson got fired like very early in a season, so it's almost like he's at 8 pretty much. So. Yeah, odds. I mean, I think it seemed like they wanted to go with a first-time head coach, and certainly Kenny Atkinson was awesome, bringing in some of the principles that he had. This is a team that needs more ball and player movement. But Odd also kind of like he still is a chip off the Bud tree through Atkinson, who has also obviously worked with Bud in Atlanta. Although I do think that Atkinson is more creative than Bud. And I think Bud failed more due to his personality stuff. So yeah, it's again, he was a finalist for the Charlotte job. I mean, it's kind of interesting that I think that they went with the big names the last 2 times, and now they're going to build something sustainable. But of course, what's going to happen with KD, Booker, I would imagine is going to get this extension that might really reduce his trade value. We'll have to see. John and I talked about that, whether we think that extension is a good idea, but it's fait accompli at this point. And hey, if you're Devin Booker to get paid, why not be Mr. Sun right now? You can always get out later, in theory, although there is the concern of it turning into a Noah trade clause.
Well, and then
can we, how would you be feeling if you work for the Suns and you're just trundling along there, working at a low level of basketball operations, and you look in your inbox, Microsoft Outlook, M. Ishbia at suns.com. I sent you an email. How
I
how are
mean,
you
is
how are
is
you
that
feeling you get this thing?
I don't know, you're feeling better if it's an email or a voicemail. Oh god. But so basically in the email which came from which we've gotten some of the detail on from was Gerald Bourget of gophnx.com and PHNX. And so basically, so some of the quotes from it is that Ishbia said he tried, quote, running the typical NBA owner playbook of, quote, hiring experts, signing checks, and getting out of the way.
Oh my god.
Hmm.
He considers what he's done so far getting out of the way, huh?
And then Ishbia intends to be, quote, extremely active in the decisions and management. And so a couple of things on this. One, it's always hard in circumstances where this is all internal to know what was the owner and what wasn't. But it certainly appears that the price that they paid for Kevin Durant, the trade assets they gave up, that was as high as it was because of Ishbia, because it was something that he saw was important and that was great
Yeah. Well,
negotiation.
or it could have just not been made, right? Like I don't know
Right.
that you can't necessarily say he did a bad job of negotiating it. It might have just been either that was the price or they would have said no. But Ishbia didn't. He obviously did say yes, and he basically gave up everything that he possibly could.
And
Well,
so that
other than the swaps, which he then used to get Beal.
Right. And then of course the Bradley Beal trade, trading for a guy who has both a no trade and a Noah trade. And and so it seems that Ishbia has been very active. And so the idea that he's going to do even more is concerning. And then but the in some ways the bigger I mean, and beyond even just like seeing what happened and thinking the idea is to be more involved than less, is just that the history of active NBA owners is not very good. And yes, Ishbia has, maybe you could say, deeper basketball roots as a walk on at Michigan State and everything else. But the the idea of this is that you don't make your billions being great at knowing basketball. You make your billions doing something else. That doesn't give you the innate ability to be good at making basketball decisions, and that's why you hopefully hire the right people and get out of their way. Maybe you're a good voice in the room to help be a check on everything like that, and to kind of balance the approaches. But there is not a good track record. And I mean, some would point to maybe to like somebody like Mark Cuban, but like there are some really big problems in Mark Cuban's tenure as an activist owner too. And there are times that he pulled back and everything else. Like it is not a good thing for the Suns if Matt Ishbia is more involved.
Well, and he also it's like I think Cuban was didn't have as many responsibilities outside of the Mavs either. But uh I'd like to know what expert he's hired. Was that Josh Bartelstein? Because they already had James Jones, and he's now been minimized. And it seems uh, certainly there are many reports, public and also just things that I've heard through the grapevine that he's actually on trade calls and is actively involved in negotiations with other teams. But I guess maybe this is better just in the sense that there will be I'm not going to say a coherent vision, but perhaps a consistent vision because it will be executed more by one man.
And one man, but then a lot of also like the other part of this, that in terms of Matishbia having a big part, is that a lot of the hires that he has made, not saying all of them, aren't necessarily don't scream merit. They scream connections and the state of Michigan as well. Where like, so you brought up Bartelstein, and the ostensible lead decision maker that they hired doesn't have a lot of experience in that, with Brian Gregory, doesn't have a lot of experience in this space, wouldn't have been somebody based on the track record that like you and I would have hired, for example. Is that's another kind of data point in this overall.
Well, we've had a few discussions lately of nepotism or connections, but maybe the most absurd has just been what's been going on in Sacramento, where yet another Sacramento king from the early 2000s has been hired. Now, Bobby Jackson, again, like he is a qualified assistant. He's been an assistant elsewhere for a long time, but just at some point, can you get, Vlade is kind of still there. Is he actually the GM? Oh, we're gonna get Scott Perry back, who was here before, and Doug Christie. We're gonna keep him on as the coach without really interviewing anyone else, as far as we know. And then we're gonna bring back Bobby Jackson to be a yes man for him because they know each other. It's absurd. They're I just don't. Is it just, well, I tried it your way, outside people. You see a lot of times with these bad owners. And so then they go back to the familiar, I won't get hurt by them. I know I can deal with them. Hey, he'll be popular in the local market,
They
right? And
can't
it's
they
just,
can't sign Rajon Rondo again.
yeah, yeah. So that's not exactly where you want to be. Uh, Although I do like being in Sacramento. And then Dan wrote about this too. With everything that's going on, I've been kind of letting him handle some of the news a little bit more. But Will Guillory reported that Zion Williamson is very unlikely to be traded before next season. You kind of figured that when he was on the dais at the lottery. Didn't really help their lottery luck as it did when they got him. And he's been hanging out with Joe Dumars and watching playoff games and stuff. So again, I wouldn't recommend trading him right now if I were them, but because I don't think he really has the value. And hey, maybe they could actually be respectable next year, although the West just continues to be an absolute bear. And then, we talked about this some. Again, Dan, I thought, had really good analysis on it, kind of beat me to it. So that's in your daily dunks. I want to know what the format's going to be for this All-Star NBA versus the world thing. Are you going to change up who the All-Stars are? Are you going to just say, we'll pick the 24 best All-Stars and then we don't need a whole team, so just the international ones will be on one team and the Americans be on the other team, and then just some people won't get to play on the American team? Or how is that going to work? Because there are more historically deserving American stars. Dan did a great job of going through that analysis again. Now I'm totally on board if it gets everyone to play hard. Like I've always said, whatever the basketball is, if there's talented basketball players and they're playing hard, I will watch it. That was my feeling on the NBA Cup. That's why I don't watch the All-Star game. Any further thoughts there?
I'm happy that all-star selections they don't affect players' money as much as they at times used to. So
Yeah.
it's still, and maybe
Yeah, they don't officially affect the money, but they certainly do subjectively, right? Like
absolutely.
if you make the All-Star team, you're more likely to get max contract. I think KP actually did an analysis on that way back, noting when Lance Stevenson was in consideration for the All-Star game, like how much money that might cost him. As it turned out, he actually didn't really get paid. If he had made an All-Star team, he probably would have got paid. And he
Yeah.
was like just off of missing it on that Pacers team that started like 31-5 in 2014. So anyway, sorry, I
No.
interrupted your
I
point there.
think, I think that there will be, if it's as rigid as the 10 best American or the 12 best Americans and the 12 best non-Americans, then there will be players who are higher who don't make it in. And that's unfortunate to the extent that it matters to their money and for those that get the honor and the recognition and all that. And so I'll wait to see everything about the format. Again, like you and I have an earned approach to the All Star game, and I don't think this is going to change that, unless, especially not until it works for a season. But I've said the general conceit: if it's not working, try something else. So as long as I've acknowledged the downsides, but it's fine.
All right. Well, this was a lot of fun. I think we got a great series ahead of us. I'm very pleased that this happened the way it did, even though it's not consistent with my pick. I would rather see more awesome basketball. Next time you'll hear from us will be on playback at 5:30 Pacific on Sunday. Nate Duncan NBA, playback.tv/Nate Duncan NBA. Man, just can't get out of a show, can I? So I'm going to do that now. Talk to y'all then.